Hello, everybody, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Comic Corner. Now, you guys know Comic Corner very dear and well by this point, but we've decided it is about time to kind of splinter it off into its own episode because we've noticed that our podcast episodes were getting a little bit too long for those of you that did want to get some comic stuff, but also didn't have about 2 hours of time to spare. And we always were doing those at the end of the episode. So we thought it was about time, with our love for comics being so large, and I think recently us really starting to get into them a lot more with the introduction of Comic Corner, it's only fair that it gets its own episode so that you guys have a separate episode each week to listen to and really get to dive into some of the comics we're reading. So I'm super pumped about that, and I know somebody else is super pumped about it. Zane, how excited are you that Comic Corner is getting its own inaugural episode?
So I'm excited. This is actually something that you had wanted almost from the inception, and I wasn't too sure about it, but I actually am excited for it. I think this is probably better. I've really enjoyed our comic breakdowns, and sometimes I felt like, oh, we need to kind of wrap this up because we were going, an hour and 20 minutes on some of those. So I definitely agree that we need to kind of break it off. It is an offshoot. It is something a little bit different than we normally talk about. So I like that I have given in to your thought processes. Also, my wife made this recommendation, so it really kind of pushed me over the edge. I was like, okay, definitely. If I got two people in my life recommending something, let's go ahead and do it. So I'm glad that I'm jumping into this bandwagon, and we'll see what we get. We actually will get a little bit different analytics for this as well, so we'll kind of see where we land. But yeah, I'm super excited about this. We have a wonderful comic to break it in for, your favorite of all time, that really kicked off your love of comics. So I don't know if it's still your favorite of all time, but it was at one point. So
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
excited to
absolutely.
see kind of how this racks up for you in our rankings. We've already done 2 comic corners, so we've done War of the Realms and we've done Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, which I think were pretty good starts. Actually, quite a bit diverse, 2 different flavors, and now we're diving into the Last Ronin. So I'm super excited to just jump into this and talk about it.
Well, first and foremost, obviously, I gotta give my thanks to Chelsea for agreeing with me and being like, Zane, you need to listen. We got to do this own episode because she even said she would love to listen to most of our episodes, but when she sees like that hour and 45 minute long episode, it can be a little bit of a turn off to watch and listen. So I'm super pumped about this. Now, a little bit about these episodes: they are going to be released on Fridays. So usually, you guys get our brand new weekly fix episodes on Tuesdays. So you guys have something to look forward to on Fridays to kind of start your weekend off, maybe on the right foot when you're going into work, because these also are going to be hopefully a little bit shorter than our weekly fix episodes. We're hoping to keep these right about 45 minutes, where weekly fix we usually try to keep it right at about an hour. So obviously it's going to be a little bit different, and this is only going to be about whatever comic we have picked for the month. So you can only expect these once a month still. We're still sticking to the once a month schedule with Comic Corner, but it is getting its own episode, so you guys don't have to hear us rush through our thoughts, and you guys really get to enjoy as much as we got to enjoy reading these. So that's just a little bit of backstory, what you guys can expect. But Zane went ahead and talked about it already, and we were talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Last Ronin, the comic book that started comic book reading for me. Now, you did touch on it a little bit. It is one of my favorites of all time, but the more I've gotten into comic reading, it's definitely not held its status as number one, but is one of
Okay.
those comics that I will always hold dear to my heart and will probably always get a little bit more leeway when I'm ranking stuff just because of that. So I'm super pumped to talk about it because even after saying this, I still think it is a fantastic comic, and I'm super excited for you because this is your first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comic, isn't it?
It is. This is one of my first actual introductions to the characters at all. So I've seen the movies, but I never got to watch the shows. So it's not that I couldn't. I may have seen a few at my grandmother's house with my cousin, and I always knew who they were. My cousin always loved them more than I did. So I just kind of tagged along and liked to play and like do the stuff when we were children, but no, never really took a deep dive into them. I never knew which colors were which. Like I didn't know red was Raphael. I always had to ask. So, but it was really fun. This was a good introduction, I think, which is funny, kind of given what the content is and that's actually one of my, like, this would be better if you knew more, but it's still not a bad jumping off point into the TMNT universe. So for me, that was actually pretty cool to kind of experience this as my first comic.
Yeah, it is interesting because, like you just said, you didn't really know each of the turtles, and this obviously does not do a deep dive into each of the turtles, which it makes it a little bit interesting for someone that's never read Ninja Turtles. But I feel like that is one thing that they do a really good job with is they do kind of tell a self-contained story about one turtle here, and that's what I think I like the most about it is they don't spend a whole lot of time trying to explain what each of the other turtles are. If you know who they are, that's awesome, and maybe it makes you feel a little bit better about the comic and you can enjoy it a little more, but they don't do spend too much time making you feel bad for their deaths or stuff like that because it is a story about one turtle who is trying to learn how to deal with the death of his brothers and kind of extract his revenge upon Shredder's grandson. So I think those are really cool story tropes. I think it's really exciting that you can put aside everything for a little bit and really just focus on one turtle. And I think that's like the crux of what makes this such an awesome book. Now I know you said that's something that maybe you could have enjoyed a little bit more is if you knew a little bit more about the turtles, and I can understand that too because maybe those deaths would have been a little bit more heartfelt.
Yeah. And they definitely would have been more heartfelt, but I actually think they did a great job pulling at the heartstrings, but not setting on the heartstrings. You
Mm-hmm.
feel the weight of them, and you feel the weight through the character of Mikey. Uh, I just did a massive spoiler, didn't I?
If people are listening to the Last Ronin comic book corner review, I think they should know what to expect. This is definitely not like a, not spoiler friendly. Like this is heavy spoilers as soon as we start these episodes. So most people know who the Last Ronin is. I
Okay.
actually knew who it was before I even read the comic, so I don't think
I
that's too big of a spoiler. But
I
let's just go ahead
didn't
and.
I
Oh, you
didn't
didn't?
know. I
Okay,
had no
okay.
clue. So I didn't do any research. And but what's funny is I was like, okay, when it got announced, like which one it was, is I believe at the end of the first comic, it's like I didn't know which one that was, which is hilarious. Like the reveal was like the me not knowing had no impact on the reveal because I still didn't know like, oh, that's the funny one who jokes a lot and he's the one
Uh-huh.
who has to deal with this somber reality of not having the friends, and the one who was the least skilled fighter, I would say potentially.
So
I
I
know
would
he used the
say
nunchucks.
So I would say the thing with Mikey has always been he has the most potential, but his character gets in the way of himself too much. He is too goofy. He doesn't take things serious enough. But he's always been the most skilled. Leonardo had to work
Okay.
super hard at what he did. And the other cool thing about the Ninja Turtles is each one of their weapons were given to them actually because it made them weaker. They had to learn how to use their weapons, which ultimately made them stronger. So that's why Mikey used the nunchucks is because nunchucks take a lot of, you have to pay attention to what you're doing. You have to really be focused, and that's what he struggled with. So that's one of the cool things that if you didn't know a whole lot about
Ah,
Ninja Turtles,
okay.
it's a little bit of backstory as to why they have the weapons that they did. Raphael was given the they're slipping
The
my
Psy.
mind right now. The Psy because they're more of a defense weapon, and Raphael is a much more attack heavy character. Same thing with Leonardo. Leonardo was more of a defense character, but he was given something that was used to be much more on the attack with. So those are some cool things like that that if you didn't know about the Ninja Turtles might make it a little bit better. But this story kind of is different because he is a master of all of them, which is really cool.
Oh yeah. No, definitely a really cool story, and really like to see it through his eyes. I think they did a good job of doing the emotional weight. And there I do have some issues with the story. And one is I think they may have set a little too long on the assault without enough content for it. It was fun, and I think the comic panels were good. It's just really
Mhm.
hard to give that amount of detail in an action scene in a comic without as many panels as it deserves. And I think with a short run like this, those scenes kind of fell flat for me. Like the final fight between him and Shredder felt a little, or Shredder's grandson, I guess I
Mhm.
should say, felt a little flat for me. But and the initial assault as well. However, I think when the story slowed down and told a story, I think it really shined, and I think this was a great comic.
I think that's especially true when you just talked about the very end of the first issue, and we kind of see where Michelangelo is revealed to be the last Ronin, and we see that he is in bed there, after he had just tried to kill himself because he had failed his mission of going to get the revenge for his brothers. And we see him actually with April. And I think that's when this comic really shines, is in those slower moments where we kind of see like the little bit of the flashbacks, and we get to see April and how she's aged, and we just kind of get to see Mikey come to terms with what has happened. I agree. I think that is where this comic really shines, because I felt like the exact same way the first time I read through it. Is I wish we had gotten more in those action scenes. I wish there was a little bit more build up to it, because they don't sometimes hit as hard when it is kind of just given to you. You kind of want to see the build up a little bit more. You kind of want to see a little bit more of that stuff. So I can completely understand where you're coming from that point. But I do think that's where the comic shines, is when it does take the time to slow down a little bit.
Yeah, and I don't want to say that I want 7 pages worth of him putting a sword through someone's head. I don't think that is what I'm really referring to in these action scenes, and I don't think you said that either. I just wanted
No.
to clarify
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
audience. I just wish like he had to use a little more thought almost
Hmm.
to get through. Like, okay, we're pinned down behind this, lay down cover fire, and then we're across the wall. That to me kind of seems like we didn't really plan out how we get to this area. We just want him to fight the big bad, and so some of those that I guess the thought for the action
Hmm.
is where it fell flat for me. But other than that, I think this was fabulous. So, do you want to jump into like our favorite moments so we can talk about kind of some of those issues?
Yeah, let's go ahead, and I want you to start here, because I know so much about the Ninja Turtle stuff, and I'm so excited that you gave this a chance and it's your first Ninja Turtle stuff. So I'd love to see what part of this book really stood out to you, being this your first time Ninja Turtle book, because I think that kind of can speak a lot to what you thought of the comic based off of what you picked for your favorite moment.
So we're gonna go. I'm gonna start with art because
Okay.
I think that's the most intriguing thing about the the genre that we're here. We're here for comics, and art is the thing that makes this different, right? We get to
Hmm.
see the beautiful art. So I'm going to start with that. And this comic did a really good job of kind of blending new and old,
Hmm.
where I think it did a great job of not leaving behind the old style just yet to straight digital, and doing a lot of really unique stuff with color palettes and switch ups, especially with the black and white. Even though I don't love the artwork, I love what they did with Blake making that black and white and showing that even the simple things of making like the text box yellow to show that we're in a flashback but not a full flashback.
Hmm.
That was awesome. But my favorite art panel was Raphael's sigh falling through the water,
Yeah.
and so that was really when the moment sunk into me that like what actually happened to his brothers. I thought he was going to get out of that moment. Honestly, I thought there was going to be something else, but to see that his rage is what killed him and that he did it alone, and then to see his side just drift to the water by his lonesome, I was like, oh man, we're gonna get that for every one of the turtles, I bet. And we did, but that was like the
Hmm.
kickoff. That was the first moment where we really got to see, and that art. I think that art of it, his side, his weapon that Mikey was using was floating through the water. I thought that was just really good, really brilliant. So I love that art panel.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and say it. I am a big fan of the art direction that they went with The Last Ronin. And as far as the comics that we reviewed so far, you touched on it, Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, and also War of the Realms. This is by far my favorite art that we've done so far on the comic show. Like, this is head and shoulders above both of the other comics, in my opinion. I just think it looks too good. This is the type of art we talk about it all the time. Like, you're not as much of a fan of the older style of comics, but I'm a sucker for them. Like, I love the old unique drawings. I love the hand drawn stuff. That's the stuff that really sticks out to me so much. And I think this comic does a really good job, which you did touch on with the color palettes. Like, you can have one panel look a certain way, and literally you look down at the bottom of the page, and it's like full of colors and fun and bright. And then the next panel, it's like really focusing in on something. And I feel like that's especially noticeable with the scene you just talked about when Raphael does meet his end for the very first time. We do see a lot of like reds in that little arc of the story, which I think is really cool, knowing that Raphael's mask is red. So I feel like they paid homage to some things like that. Like, you can see the colors automatically shift when it's Raphael's. We have a very red tone for a lot of those pages, which I thought was really, really cool, which is something I can appreciate. But my favorite panel actually comes in the first issue, when we see Mikey when he feels like he has been defeated. And I love the panel where he sets down everybody's weapons in front of him and he's just kind of looking over them and we see him put their masks across all the weapons. That was for me when I knew I was going to really like the story that was being told. And we see him in that scene. He talks about how he misses his brother so much. And I just feel like that's such an impactful scene for somebody that's gone their whole life with his brothers. Like he's trained with them, he's learned from them, and then just to not have them anymore and to be on the path that he is on and to feel like he has failed them. That was a super impactful stream for me, like scene for me. And I just love that. I think it looks so cool. Just the idea behind it. It's a scene that I'm really hopeful that if we ever do get a Last Ronin show, which there's been talks about it, there's been talks about a video game, there's been all
We are
sorts of
getting
talks.
a movie
Yes. So
confirmed.
I really hope that is a scene that really hits home because I feel like it is probably the most impactful scene in the entire comic run for me. I just love it. So that's my personal favorite from this. And like I said already, this is my favorite, just pure art, based off the whole book that we've done so far. I really love it. But that scene in particular really
Yeah, and
sticks out to me.
it has really great contrast in that moment. Looking at that comic, you got the bright red, and then Mikey is like that gray,
Hmm.
almost as if it's showing the emotion of defeat within the
Yep.
color palette. I just, dude, I do. I think they did a great job with this. Now, you did touch on the artwork for the other two that we reviewed, and I did want to give my opinion of where this stood art wise. This is second for me. I preferred the pastels and the creativity in Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, but I think this is a close second. It is head and shoulders above War of the Realms. I don't think
Yeah.
they're even comparable or close. I think the detail and the stylized art of this one is far superior to War of the Realms, especially without how cluttered they were and uncreative with the abilities with what they were doing. But I think this is definitely very close to Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow as far as art style. The other one just stands out a little bit more to me because I do love those little bit more unique scenes that I think Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow brought out. Whereas this one was brilliant and really well done, but there was some that I was like, I don't love what they're doing here.
And that's understandable because I some of the scenes can be a little basic throughout the Last Ronin, which sometimes I do find like the enjoyment in those. Like it's a little bit of
Oh
like
yeah,
a brain refresher. Like okay, there's not as much going on in this scene, but also I think it really speaks as you talked about the pastel colors, which is just something you probably prefer a little bit. I think that's what I like so much about Last Ronin is like the deep colors that we do get throughout the entire run. Everything is like a color, like everything is like a real solid color, which I think I really do like about it.
yeah, and I think really what's drawing me away is almost the art form for when it was just Mikey's flashback in between the time of his brother's death and his form, the final form of the Last Ronin. I
Hmm.
I didn't like that art
Okay.
style. I just don't like it, and it's really cool. I love what they were doing with it, but I think they could have just. It just seems like a cheap drawing almost. It almost seems
Okay.
like it was like quickly done, and I know it wasn't. It's an art style that they were using. I just personally don't like that, and so that was one of the reasons it doesn't. But like even every time that like April O'Neil is on, and we get to see like she's always almost bright and very solid on the page. And I
Yeah.
like the first time we get to see the grandson of Ronin training with his ninjas and how he is so bright and vibrant, outspoken against his with the skin colors. I do think this art is really, really good. So I don't know.
Well, and
I don't have a lot of complaints, but
yeah, yeah.
it was just when we're ranking, I think this does fall just shy of Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow.
And I do think though they pays homage. One thing I know this is your first Ninja Turtle, but that's one of the cool things for people that have read it and watched it and stuff. April is always that bright character. They did let her don her classic yellow in this comic, which is really fun, especially in a comic that is doing so many different things. They still did pay homage to the original April and stuff like that. So those are some of the things that I can also see that maybe if you known some of those other little things, you would have like. I'm not saying you're. I know you did like the art style, but just little things like that really elevate it for those that have read some stuff and have watched some stuff that they were able to still pay homage to those, but also do it in a way that like fit the scene. Like obviously she's not wearing like a bright yellow mechanic suit like we've seen her wear in like the cartoons and stuff, but it is still, reminiscent of that. So I do appreciate those things that they did throughout this comic as well.
Yeah, and I actually did misspeak. I meant Casey, her
Oh, Casey
daughter.
Jones.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but
Which
anyway,
Casey,
yeah.
I love Casey Jones. I think we've actually talked about him on a Weekly Fix episode. We were talking
Well,
about our
no,
favorite
isn't
side
isn't
characters.
that their daughter?
Oh well,
Didn't they
technically it
name
is.
her
I guess
Casey?
I thought you were talking about. So this is one of those things we need to probably, yeah, because is ultimately their daughter, but that is
Yep.
also a character's name. So that's funny that we were both thinking of two different characters.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Funny.
yeah, yeah. No, I get what you're saying now, though. Okay, now I get where you're saying. I get where you're at a little
Okay.
bit more now.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
Um,
Sorry. Sorry.
okay, I gotcha. Yes, I now that I'm looking through those panels, I see exactly what you're talking about. So, okay, but yeah, so that was your favorite art piece.
Yeah.
Another thing we like to talk about is like our favorite moment. Is there a moment in this comic that really stood out to you that you're like, okay, that was pretty cool?
Yeah. So it's funny. My favorite moment was actually when, because I think this is a little bit unique and not super. This comic was full of wonderful moments, and it was really difficult to pick out one because they all were like, it was consistent comic. It was a very
Hmm.
consistent comic, but one that I really liked was when he agreed to train Casey. And when she calls him sensei, I just love that moment where he's not letting his baggage drag anyone down. He's letting him, like, he's not worried about her. He's allowing her to do what she needs to do her skills, and then with April's approval of it. Like, she's not withholding her daughter from what she would have done. She's allowing her to essentially follow in her footsteps, but even more so because of her mutagen powers. I really thought that was a cool moment. It was heartfelt. It was a little bit off the path because usually, like when this happens, like there's like some pushback or fight, like I will train you, I won't train you, and it just seemed like this was like what they would have done. Like he would have just came back and he would have saw her training and he would have just trained her. Like it seems like an automatic what would happen in real life if we had a sensei essentially and a child, not like if we had a teenage mutant ninja turtle run around, but if we had this situation where somebody comes back, they want to fight, they're already in the fight, they're already doing dangerous stuff. Let's just train them. I thought that was good. I thought that was a really good moment and really shows the generational transfer. It also allows for a future for the Ninja Turtles and allows for those last pages to be more impactful when he hands her the book. I think it just builds on it. So this was my favorite moment, which was really hard to pick out and may come as a really surprise for favorite moment because there were so many other ones, but this was mine.
Well, I think you did touch on it very well. Is I also agree. Like, I hate sometimes that pushback of like, I'm not going to train you. You're not deserving of it. La di da di da. Because ultimately, we know how this is going to end. Like, he's going to train her. It's not going to be one of those things. It's more just a matter of when they're finally going to admit to it. And the fact that it was kind of just like a fluid, like thing. Like, okay, I'm going to do it. Like, I think that's what makes it so cool. It makes it a little bit more special. Because he would have done that, especially in the situation they were in, and knowing the ties that April has to the Ninja Turtles and how much she has helped them, and how much Casey has already decided that she's going to help them as well. I think that's a really great moment. And again, it is neat that like there are a lot of really great moments in here, but I like that you did pick that one because I don't feel like that does get really talked about. I had never really even thought about it until you mentioned that like yeah, usually with that stuff there is this back and forth of no, I'm not going to train you and stuff like that. So I appreciate that as well. You kind of opened my eyes to that moment just now. Like that is really cool that they just did it and went with it.
So, yeah, but I'm actually really excited to hear what your favorite moment is because there is so many, and I had to really like I was sitting there for like as I was reading, I'd try to take like mental notes of like, oh yeah, this was it, and I didn't really have. I had too many to actually make it a usable list. I was like, it was funny because I had to whittle it down pretty hard. So I'm
Yeah.
excited to see what you chose.
So mine is actually I don't know why I love this moment so much. And it's the issue that we got with Donatello and Master Splinter when we're kind of getting to see the path that they went down and how they are ultimately brought to
Oh,
their end. But there's a
oh,
seed, like just throughout that whole issue, it is so good. We're getting so much backstory with Master Splinter and how well respected he is. Donatello, I feel like, is generally, I know he's a lot of people's favorite turtle, but most of the time, I feel like he is probably the least favorite of the three or of the four turtles. Usually we hear Mikey is probably that's probably the number one favorite turtle. Then usually Raphael or Leonardo, depending on who you talk to. And then Donatello is usually left at the end. And I think they did a really good job with him in this issue. But there's one scene in particular I love where we see Master Splinter just behead three people, and I just, when I saw that moment, it's like, that is the leader of the Ninja Turtles. Like, that's who's trained these guys, that's who made them this ultimate weapon. And I feel like that whole issue just did such a good job of showing how strong he was, but then ultimately doing a good job of showing how they did eventually get him to die. Like, you got to figure out a good way to get someone that strong off of the board, and I feel like they did do a really good job of explaining that and not making it feel like he just died for nothing. So that scene for me, yeah, I just love that whole issue. The art in that issue is one of my favorite. It's got like a really warm sense to it, and it kind of just feels like, he's their dad. He was protecting them. He was doing everything that he could. Ultimately, he wasn't able to do it, but he does, give his life for it. And I love that warm sense that we got throughout that whole issue. I just think it's so good.
And it was really good. I did have that was the kind of battles that you really love to see on the page. This was not one of those moments where the action was lacking in storytelling, because even through the action they're showing the storytelling, like you said, him beheading those people, him saying I'll cut my own path as he cuts another person's head in half. Like, call me Master Splinter. I like so many good lines, so many good moments in that fight, but I did have the issue of like it seemed a little unwise for him to go forward and then to fall to his demise of the arrows.
Mhm.
It did seem a little rageful, and I know he's not super happy because he did just hear about the demise of his sons back in New York City. So definitely some emotionals going there, but I do wish that like it didn't seem rageful or like a loss of control in that moment. Donatello seems like in that moment he's the wise one. So, but Master Splinter is the one that's like kicking butt. Like
Yeah.
he is insane in that moment. So what a good one. And I love that they saved that one for last. And how they told the demise of the Ninja Turtles. I love that this is the final one. I thought that was really good.
Yeah, and I can agree with you. I think it might have been really cool if we got to see him like come toe to toe with like Shredder or like Shredder's grandson or something, and I think that would have added more to the weight of the story of Mikey really feeling like he's getting to avenge his, not only like his brothers through defeating him, but ultimately the guy that did kill his dad. Like, I think that could have been something that maybe hit a little harder, and I would have liked to have seen that fight. I think maybe it's just me being jealous and being like, oh, I would have loved to have seen them go one on one. But I do kind of get what you're saying. Like, it does kind of seem like, but I also thought that was like kind of a really cool point that he had done a really good job of training his sons, and Donatello is the one that's like, hey, we need to calm down, like we shouldn't
Yeah.
be doing. And it kind of is like that, we see that trope sometimes where sometimes your emotions do get the best of you, even the strongest of will-minded people, and that's where the people that you've trained or your family is supposed to step in and be like, hey, take a step back. And so I did kind of like that aspect of it as well, though. Like, Donatello was showing that he has matured, he has,
No, that
gotten
was
to
a
this
great.
point. So I do kind of agree. Like, it kind of reminded me, we just got done watching Gladiator 2, and we see that's how General Acacius dies. Like, we kind of want this awesome moment where he does get to square off against somebody, and then he dies to the hands of somebody else, but they just kill him with some arrows. So it is
Yeah.
frustrating, but you kind of understand it at the same point.
Well, and I also understand it because you don't want to show him as weaker than the grandson. You want
Yeah.
to show him, and I don't think they did that. I think they do a good job because it is really hard for Master Splinter to be ripping through all of these people, and then you're like, okay, how do we justify him losing to somebody? And you
Hmm.
really don't. You have to use advanced technology to do it. And I think it would have been maybe even cooler if like it was a Gatling gun or something that was
Yeah.
weaponry, like that was a cheat, like a dishonoring samurai path, almost as if like the Last Samurai with Tom Cruise moment. I think that would be kind of cool.
Yes. Yeah. That would
I
be
love
cool.
that movie, but no, I love that moment. That's a great moment.
Yeah, and you know how I am about the action stuff. I think when you saw him slice those three heads off, like, that was it
Yeah,
for me. Like, I was like,
yeah,
all
that
right,
makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
when you
so
said it, I was like, oh yeah, yeah. Clearly, this is Jacob's moment.
Yeah, that's so cool. Another thing we love to talk about with these comic books is there like a line or like a piece of writing that really struck home with you that you were like, okay, that was really cool, or maybe you just felt like it fit the setting really well or was perfectly timed. Is there just a piece of dialogue that really stuck with you?
So, not one specific line, but one moment. And so it's almost cheating because I get to pick two moments, you know. But the exposition in this one was very fun, and this was when Mikey was telling of what he did after the passing of his father. And so this is like our first black and white flashback when he's walking into the mountains, and it's like him trying to die to the elements and then almost coming to terms with it, finding peace, and then training like a savage to become uh the last Ronin and
Uh,
making his way back. I just thought the storytelling in those moments and the writing really shine. Now, obviously, like I talked about how I don't love the art of that moment, but I think those are the moments where the storytelling was really, really solid. And that's why I kind of wish that the art was a little bit better. But the storytelling was so strong in those moments. I think the exposition really carried the emotional weight of that and was really, really good. Just telling the story of like what he emotionally was going through. I think that was one of the best moments that was just straight dialogue that really stuck out to me.
yeah, and I agree with that, and I think there's a lot of moments you can pick throughout this comic that are like really really good. For me personally, it kind of comes. It's literally the end of the comic in the epilogue where we're seeing Casey's training and stuff, and we're getting ready to be revealed that they're actually getting new mutant turtles that they're eventually going to train to kind of take the mantle of Mikey, Donatello, Leo, and Raphael. But what I love the most is that scene where we see her training and she looks back down at the book that Mikey had, and that's where he had all like his stuff in there. That's where he wrote notes down and things like that. And she looks at it and she says, "Well, I'm going to keep training. I'm going to get stronger." And she like promises. I think let me open it back up to that page. But she like promises her sensei, who was Mikey, that she's gonna get there. Like she's gonna, ultimately. She says, "I wish you were here still to see how far I've come, but I'll keep training. I'll keep learning. I'll keep getting better, sensei, and I won't let you down." Like I love that, and I think the moment that I love so much for me is us, we're comic book fans, right? These are books and things that can really leave an impact on you and really leave a long lasting story. And I love how important that little book is to her in that moment, that it does keep a piece of him with her. She always has something she can go to, somewhere she can go. She's struggling to learn something. He's always going to be with her through that book. And I think that's what's so special about books in general. Like we love comic books. There's always a cool story to be told, but sometimes the story doesn't have to be cool. Sometimes it can just be something that really hits home. For me, I've talked about it so many times. The Last Ronin holds a special place in my heart just because it's the first comic that got me interested into reading more comic books. So I kind of have that same feeling when I see her looking at that book. Like it's kind of like that sentimental value. Like it's so cool that she has that to remember him by, but also it's going to be a tool for her moving forward.
Yeah. And no, and absolutely great moment. I think that's one of the like I said, like that moment hits home even harder. That brings my favorite moment to life, right? Like
Yeah.
them actually getting that moment of sensei acceptance and training, even though it's short lived, lives on past that moment into your favorite exposition, right? It's her
Yep.
commitment to him and to continue the legacy, and that's a really cool moment to pick. It's
Yeah.
hard not to pick the final moments. I remember in Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, I was like, clearly my favorite exposition is at the end when like they're breaking it all down, the entire point of the story. And so yeah, very, very cool, very good moment to select.
Yeah, and those are the moments that they are kind of cheat codes, but sometimes they do really hit, and they are deserving to be called your favorite dialogue of the whole book. And that's just how I felt with that book, like moment. It just feels like it pulled everything together, and I think that's what makes it so special. I love this book. You guys have already heard that so much, and I'm excited to see. I'm sure you guys probably know where this is going to rank out of the comics that we've read so far. But Zane, what were just your overall thoughts of the book before we do rank it?
Yeah, my overall books was better than I expected. A very fun introduction to the Ninja Turtles. Very heavy, uh, and
Mhm.
also just I really liked it. The Casey Jones, um, the daughter, was
Mhm.
the surprise shock for me. I really loved her character. I really liked her introduction and her importance throughout it. I thought it really did a great job grounding Mikey. and her strings pulling through it. So yeah, this was great. I was surprised, and I'm very happy with it. So very solid comic.
I think the real question is, with this being your first Ninja Turtle book, does it have you interested to read more Ninja Turtle stuff moving forward?
So it has me open. It doesn't have
Okay.
me seeking, but it has me open to it. Like if I hear some, like I wouldn't just go pick up a random Ninja Turtle
Hmm.
comic, but if there was a finished series where somebody was like, "Hey, this is really good," I'd be like, "Yeah, I'd pick that up and try it."
Okay, I think that's fair too, especially with how much stuff we have to read. Obviously you're a big Marvel junkie, so those are going to be the books that you naturally pull yourself to. But I think if a book does its job and having you open to like, hey, maybe you're at the comic shop, you don't see any Marvel stuff that you really like, and you pick up a Ninja Turtle book, you read the back cover of it, and you're like, oh, that sounds pretty interesting. And I know my experience with Ninja Turtles a little bit better now. It might be something you'd be interested in actually pulling the trigger on. So I think that's speaks volumes that it did its job. Now, obviously, you want it to be like, yes, I'm dying to read more because that's how I was when I finished this. Like, I just
Yeah.
loved it. I thought it was so good. So I'm at
Now,
least happy though.
uh, do we have the continuation of this where the new Ninja
So
Turtles are trained by Casey?
yes, so we're actually getting that right now. It is currently coming out. That is called The Last Ronin 2 Re-Evolution. I'm actually reading through it right now. I think we're 4 issues in. Um, I think it's 4. I'm not caught up on it. I've read the first 2. I know I have all of them. I just haven't had time to read the last 2. I think it's 4 right now. So there is a continuation of it coming out. It's really good so far. It's been really fun. The nice thing about the Last Ronin series is they do come in like the nice premiere comic books. So they're like really thick. The paper's nice, which you probably noticed in this. Like obviously we both
Yeah,
read the complete
I
hard
kept thinking
cover
I
of
was
it.
skipping. I kept feeling like I was
Yes.
skipping pages.
Yeah, so the actual comics are actually that way as well. Like they're very high quality, very thick paper, which
Nice.
I really like. So
No, that's a
I
big
think that's
deal.
also nice. It does make a big difference. It's a lot easier. It's like for me, sometimes you like can tear comic pages really, really easy. These ones you can't. Like you can be a little bit rougher with this book. You can actually just sit down and read it and not have to worry about those type of things. So that's one cool aspect of it. But yeah, so there is actually the second part of it coming out right now. So if it does have you interested to see, how the story ended, we do see those little 4 turtles at the very end being mutated. There is something to look forward to after this.
No, and I would be interested to pick that up. Like that does intrigue me. Like I would be interested to see how she deals with training a new generation.
Yeah, so I think that might be right up your alley. Like I said, it is literally coming out right now, which is super exciting for me because I'm still trying to go back and find the original prints of The Last Ronin. So I was super happy when I found out we were getting The Last Ronin 2 because we're just getting like I can get those copies like right away. I've been getting to enjoy them as everybody else is reading them. So it's been really fun to not kind of like I'm happy you didn't know who The Last Ronin was because for me, I did know who it was when I went into it. So I was like, so I feel like that shock factor was probably really fun when you did find out who it was. So that's been exciting for me with The Last Ronin 2 is kind of getting to experience those shock value things.
Yeah, which is fun.
Yeah. So, all right. Where do you rate this one? We've read 3 so far. We've read Supergirl One of Tomorrow. We've read War of the Realms, and now we have added the Last Ronin to our comic corner list. You guys know how we like to rate these. We don't really necessarily rate them on a scale. We rate them in like order of our best read to our worst read so far. So I have a feeling I know where this one's going to fall for you, but let's hear it.
Yeah, this one falls solidly in second place, very close to Woman, Supergirl. Uh, well, far closer to Supergirl than War of the Realms is to this. So War of the Realms is a very far last place, and this one is up there in the same ballpark as Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow for me, but it is in second. I think the message, I think the message of the Supergirl storyline is just a little bit better for me. Uh, that I just prefer it, and I think the twist ending also was fun, and some of that stuff. But this one's very good, very solid, but it is second place for me.
I think that's super fair, especially for you not having an introduction into Turtles. I think if you read some other Ninja Turtle stuff, not even like the next Last Ronin 2, if you just like maybe went back and you did find a story that you really wanted to read, we actually, if you wanted to hop in, Ninja Turtles actually has a new run that is those turtles right now. It just started. I think we're only on issue 4 of that as well, which it's separate from the Last Ronin series. It's like its own thing. I think that might be something that could even elevate this even more for you. I don't know that it'll get past Supergirl for you because I know how much you really enjoyed that one, but I do think it could close the gap some more if you did read some other Ninja Turtle stuff, got more acquainted with it, and then went back to this and could really appreciate it, with that in your mind. Like, these characters a little bit more. Maybe those deaths hit even harder, and I think they did a good job, like you said, of still making them hit hard. But I think some of those things could have got it even closer for you and maybe made it a little bit harder of a decision. For me personally, this is number one. This takes the cake for me in our comic reading so far. I think just for me growing up watching the Ninja Turtle cartoons and stuff, obviously some of those things play into it. But I think this is just a really, really great story. And I do feel comfortable telling those of you that haven't read Ninja Turtles, I think this is a good jumping on point. And that's why I told Zane, I told him, like, hey, this would be a really great jumping on point, even though you haven't read anything else, even though you don't know the other Turtles. I still think this was fun. Would you still agree with that after having read it?
Oh yeah, yeah. This is a good story. It's worth the jumping on point. I like it.
So that's awesome. I'm glad I didn't lead you astray there. At least I got you, somewhat happy with the Ninja Turtle story that you got to read. But
Oh,
no,
definitely happy.
I think this does a lot of great things. If you guys haven't picked up The Last Ronin, you can get this on sale so often. It's such a great story. You can actually get the nice hardback like me and you both have. I actually love, I don't know if you had a chance to look through the like bonus art that they add to these
Oh,
at the very end.
absolutely.
Some of those are fantastic. Like, they look so, so good. I think that's probably some of the coolest parts about these like special edition covers and stuff like this, these hardcovers, is the little art that you get at the very end, kind of showing some of the comic covers that they did when they originally released these, some of the second printings and stuff like that. I love them. I think they're so cool. So again, you guys can go pick this up. I'm sure it's on sale somewhere because it's always on sale. It's been out for quite some time now. Awesome story, Zane. I'm glad that you got to enjoy it. Is there anything else though that you wanted to talk about for the last run before we wrap this episode of Comic Corner up?
No, man, I'm happy, and I think this is a great kicking off point. So now we have a disagreement on the board for our rankings. So
Mhm.
I'm curious how you'll have to keep yours now, and we'll see where they land.
Yeah, I think that's what's going to make it fun, though, is we're eventually, I think it's kind of not really surprising with the first two books that we read, but I
Oh
think it's
yeah.
going to be really fun to kind of see those types of stories that we like evolve as we continue to read more comics together and stuff like that. Eventually, our lists, I feel like, are going to be extremely different, which I think
Oh
is
yeah.
super exciting. But I think a lot of the time, they're probably going to land pretty similarly. I think we could see a lot of like, I might have a book ranked number 3 and you might have it at 4. I think we'll have them always pretty close, but I don't think they'll ever be quite the exact same, which is super fun. It gives people a little bit better of understanding of the type of stuff that we like to read. So, yeah, our first disagreement on the inaugural episode of the Standalone Comic Corner, which I think that's a pretty great way to start it out.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But guys, that is this week's episode of Comic Corner. If you guys did enjoy it, let us know if you guys like this being its standalone episode. I think it's going to be easier for you guys to digest. It gives you guys an opportunity to kind of separate yourselves from all the other stuff that we have going on, because it's hard to keep up in this world, and we do our best, but I think having a separate episode for this is going to be really good. If this is your guys' first time ever watching us, we're so happy that you're here. You guys can expect a Comic Corner episode every single month. We're usually going to drop it on a Friday. We'll have to decide on which type of Friday we want to drop it on, whether it's probably going to be the first Friday of the month, which might be a really great spot for us to be, or maybe the last one. This one will be dropping on the first Friday of the month, so maybe that'll just be something we stick with moving forward, but you guys can look forward to it at that point. I'm super pumped about this. I think it's going to be really fun. We have not decided on our next Comic Corner book, so that'll be something you guys will know for the next episode. Maybe we'll keep it a secret leading all the way up till then, because it might be a little bit fun for you guys to experience it from the very beginning of the episode. So that's going to do it for this week's or this month's episode of Comic Corner. Again, thank you guys so much for listening, and we can't wait to see you in the next one.